Welcome to episode 2 of The Material Mix, the podcast from Holcim exploring the future of materials and sustainable construction across the UK. I'm Hannah McInnes, and today we're turning from carbon to circularity. If our first episode asked how we reduce emissions from essential materials like cement, today we're asking a different but equally urgent question. How do we stop wasting the materials we already have? Construction has long operated on a linear model: take, make, use, dispose. But what if the assets we build were seen as material banks? What if demolition became harvesting? What if waste became our most valuable resource? So in this episode, we're going to explore circular thinking and how it is reshaping construction, from design and demolition to policy and procurement. And we look at what it will take to move faster from ambition to action. So I'm delighted to welcome my panel. I cannot think of 3 people more perfectly positioned to discuss this subject with me. Kim Gault is Principal Sustainability Consultant at Cundall. Dr. Helen Fairclough is a lecturer in structural engineering at the University of Sheffield, also co-investigator of Build Zero Research Project, and Danielle Dawson is Innovation Manager at Holcim. Thank you all very much for joining. Lots to discuss, but I'm going to start with what always feels like a really simple question, but I think that particularly in the world of sustainability, words have become used so frequently we actually forget what the most simple things mean, and it's just really important at the outset to establish. So, the circular economy, Danielle, just that small question. Can you just explain what it is, particularly obviously with regards to construction?
So I'm going to take it back a second, because circular economy, it's a scary word and people don't really understand what it actually means, but it's actually in our everyday life. It's in the natural world. So if you look around us, we've got your grass grows, right? Then you get rabbits that eat it, insects that eat it. Then you have something else which eats that. It's a predator-prey thing. It's energy is only ever borrowed and it is returned to the earth. So like the natural world, within construction, we dig up rocks, we make those rocks into something, we can then dismantle their use afterwards and return it back to its natural resource. So again, it's coming back from this linear take, make, waste model and implementing a full circular economy where value of the raw material is kept at every part of the phase of its life cycle, just like grass, basically, insects, etc. So yeah, I think that's circular economy in a nutshell. It's borrowing, using, putting back, using again, and the cycle continues.
See, it is simple, but it really does need beautifully explaining like that so succinctly. Thank you very much, and also very visual. So I've got the image in my mind. Why then do you think it's becoming more urgent of a conversation now, Kim?
There's two particular reasons that I don't know why we still need to remind people of the urgency of why circular economy is so it's so much required now, and it's nothing new. On the back of the definition that Danielle just said, it's nothing new. We just need to remind ourselves of those natural processes and reapply them to today's society and the way that we build and make things. So, just to remind everybody of the urgency that we're in, there's 2 elements of it. Is the global warming of obviously the carbon, and the relevant, like the continuation of the global heating reaching 1.5, 1.6 degrees regularly since 2024. And it's like that was the Paris agreed target for global warming because of human-made carbon creation. The Paris Agreement does state that it needs to be averaged over a 20-year period. So just because we've met the 1.5, it doesn't necessarily mean that, we failed. We still have chance to average out the 1.5 back down. And so if anything, that's like, well, we've already met it. Like, we need to now start reversing that and improving on it. The other fact that I found absolutely astounding is that back in 2020, a paper came out that basically said that anthropogenic mass overtook natural bio-based materials within the world. That means humankind has created so much stuff in the world that it's taken over natural like resources. And I just think that's crazy that the human race as one species on this planet has done that. And it's just showing us how much materials are already existing in the world. And we need to be able to work within what we've already got. So that's like the urgency of the issue here, really.
I mean, you've answered the question, I think, and we perhaps know the answer, or maybe it's even a false dichotomy of a question to say, is this necessary economically or environmentally? Is that even a question to separate those two things, Helen?
No, I think it needs to be a coupled system. I think we talk about the word sustainability a lot, but if we just think about the definition of that, to sustain something indefinitely, it can't be linear. It can't be take something from here and put it there. That's always going to run out, whatever the thing happens to be. And when that runs out, our economy runs out just as quickly as the material does.
But I suppose also people fail to think when they put the economic question in there of the long term. It's much more short term thinking, not thinking of the sort of sunken costs, long term costs.
Absolutely. There's so much value in the materials that are already in our buildings. And that value we kind of think of as just vanishing as soon as we don't want it in this particular form, whereas that doesn't need to be the case. We can maintain that value over multiple life cycles of a material or an element or a whole building even.
I mean, one of the things is obviously within the space of this lovely conversation, there's a slight element of us kind of preaching to the converted. We all necessarily agree, but is there demands from other places? I mean, do clients want this, Danielle?
I would say, yeah. I'd say we did our circularity survey back end of last year, and it was over 90% are aware, and they've got recycling targets now in place. So I speak to a lot of manufacturers, ready mixers, precasters, which have embedded in their strategy the use of recycled materials within concrete. And obviously that will come down from policymakers and clients as well. So the UK market wants to see this. And again, highlighting the issues in terms of the economics of it, we have to make it happen. It's in strategy now.
We have to make it happen. Obviously, we want to talk about how, but how much is it happening? Is it happening enough, Kim?
It's interesting because you say clients want this. But again, the same issue with policies all up and down, all issues are always lagging slightly. They're more fixed. They're not as reactive as we'd like them to be because of the rate the built environment progresses. But policy's not keeping up with it. Local plans that are only updated every 10 years is probably not enough. So as much as we've got the latest policies around like Greater London authorities, retrofit first policies from Westminster Council that are now asking more for embodied carbon reporting, but also circular economy metrics, you don't see that as much in other local regions yet. I know Lincoln have retrofit for policy elements included, or Birmingham City Council are looking to incorporate some in their local plan, and even Manchester to a certain extent. These are just the regions I work in. I'm not saying that is the definitive list. But I also see probably more requests from clients. So key developers have certain levels of circular economy requirements within their own sustainability-focused ESG metrics around materials, longevity, adaptability. So I think I would say it's more client-driven to facilitate and support the reduction of embodied carbon. I wouldn't say they go necessarily hand in hand all the time, but most of the time it is a really effective tool to reduce embodied carbon, which at the moment is the key driver.
I really want to come back to policy and how much that's keeping up or not with demand, or with what people like us or you would like to see happening. But can we just figure out what actually needs to be put in place for it to happen, sort of infrastructure-wise? I mean, how much? I think we've got a long way to go in that sense, haven't we?
Yeah, I think there's a lot needed across a lot of different strategies as well. So everything from recycling, there obviously needs to be support to get the actual material level changed. So cement, concrete. Ideally, where we can, we'd also like for that to be happening at the next level up. So keeping a beam or a column as a single thing. But again, that's a slightly different set of requirements that you need more storage spaces somewhere located, which is again a planning issue of where do you put those, where are they allowed to be built? and how do you then match the right people with what's in this storage, all the way up to, as you were saying, about the retrofit first. So if we keep them in the building itself, we've got the minimum amount of effort and energy used to reuse that building. So I think we need enablers across all of those different levels, really.
Is the legality of the wording around waste as well? Is it waste? Is it an unwanted resource? The logistics of handling those materials and whether it's defined as waste as well. I think that needs to definitely be updated because it's quite dated.
But in terms of retrofit, it feels to me like a mindset shift that needs to happen before anything. I mean, Danielle, the idea of making the most of what we already have, that goes against everything you were saying about what we've done as humans since we are on this planet. It's the complete opposite mindset that we then need, not to build, not to make more, not to do what we've sort of become wired to do. That's quite a difficult challenge.
It's very important that we are all here today like this, because I'm a big advocate for collaboration, not just within the industry itself, but across industry too. So the whole supply chain to kind of get together and understand our challenges, each other's challenges, how we can progress from that. Picking up what you said on the embodied carbon side as well, the infrastructure in place. We can put recycled materials into our concrete, into our cement perfectly fine, but you're right, it doesn't always align with embodied carbon because we need those extra steps in place. And coming back to what you were saying in terms of the progression of it, if we were going to take a recycled aggregate, we'd need to demolish the building, sort the building, crush the material, sort the material before putting it back into our process itself, all of which incorporates more transport, more handling of the material, which pushes that embodied carbon up to get that end recycled content. Yes, long term, it's going to be better, but right now that upfront carbon piece, again, is taking a lot more priority. So yes, mindset as well. How can we make those processes more efficient? How can we decarbonise those processes? We need everybody in the room here to discuss it.
I mean, on the mindset, sticking with the mindset, because it perhaps is one of the biggest things to overcome. What about people's idea of recycled materials? They have this idea that if it's recycled, it can't quite be so good.
Yeah.
Yeah, the amount of times I've spoken to architects and it's like, oh, it doesn't align with the design brief or the architectural vision or something. And if anything, I see it as a challenge. I see them as like flexing their design capabilities of like reimagining things. And I think that's where the most beautiful things happen, is when you consider the repurposing of materials into something completely different. And I think that is art in itself, and you can make that look beautiful, and you can have architectural finishes and facades and even exposed concrete. Like it's like fashionable now. But I don't like to use the word fashionable when it comes to buildings, because that actually creates that negative association with shorter lifespans, like clothing and stuff.
Really interesting, and also positive, because actually that idea of new not being the thing is becoming more and more something that people appreciate. Do you think? I mean, you're definitely the person to ask, Ellen.
I think there's definitely, the heritage of a building can make it more interesting, can make it more alive than something that's purely new. Particularly when this is done sensitively, it can keep, for example, by keeping an existing building, that might be preserving more of the character of the area with some modifications to suit what the latest sort of requirement from the spaces internally are. So it can be actually a positive for the community and the area as well as environmentally.
Danielle, you looked enthused before. Did you have something you wanted to sort of add to the idea of people thinking recycled might not be so good?
So recycled concrete has been used in concrete manufacturing for as long as I've been alive, and probably a lot longer as well. And that was as a cost-saving measure. The idea behind lesser quality at the time, yes, would have probably been true. Talking 20, 30 odd years ago, but that's not necessarily the case now. Technology has moved on. We can make a better product out of recycled materials. So the whole concept of putting recycled into new product is not new. That's been going on for years and years. So that's what my challenge has been as well, is reassuring people that things have changed now. We've got better sorting methods, better material selection, and that will only get better. So the recycled concrete aggregate of the past is not the recycled concrete aggregate of the future.
I know I've already spoken on this, but it was more to add it's the quality issue, but sometimes it's seen as quite gimmicky. So when you see a t-shirt completely made out of like plastic bottles, you think it's just like a marketing strategy for that company. I think it just needs to be the new norm. It just needs to be the normal process that we start incorporating existing materials back into processes.
When we talk about processes, obviously we want to keep the buildings that we have and do as much as we can without having to build more. And that feels like from the outset, especially I'm never going to stop thinking now about your statistic, and it's the backdrop to all of this. So we want not to have to keep building, but we will. So how do we work circularity into the future of building? Should there be mandated targets for developers in how much content is circular products?
Yes, I think there's two sides to this. So Daniela was saying about recycled content, and I don't want to see just targets around a certain percentage of recycled materials, because with circular economy, it's about the flow of the materials coming in and out. So fair enough if you set a high recycled content of new components going into a product, it doesn't necessarily make it circular. It needs to ensure that that product can be repurposed, reprocessed into a new product after that. If you start combining materials on components, which is very thought through with concrete, it's how that can still be separated or reprocessed or recycled, downcycled, because when you start looking at metrics, it gets really messy. There is no one metric. Circular economy is an umbrella term. It can't be defined by one metric, and it also doesn't have to relate directly to materials. It can be lots of other things. So it's such a broad topic. So yes, I feel like it should be mandated, like the retrofit first policy, for considerations for understanding existing materials that you've already got and creating the narrative around clients and developers to understand the worth that they've already got before they start looking new.
I mean, that's a really interesting point. I'd love to hear your thoughts first on the mandated question, but also on how you do get them to understand what's in the material they've already got. That's a big task and a really important one.
It definitely is. I think the real challenge here is that by definition, we need to be looking on a more individual basis when we're thinking about what have we already got. So it's what materials are nearby, what materials are already on site, and also how can we make the whole kind of site work as a system as well, potentially. Can we adjust the massing of where things flow? I think it's a really tricky challenge, particularly from the kind of planning perspective, because how do you know, as a planner, you're not so much of, maybe not an engineer, don't know whether could that be possible. So I think there's a real need for tools for almost non-experts to be able to take a look and say, oh, maybe we could do it that way, or actually this particular site, that's not applicable, that's not a suitable restriction to be putting in place, and we're just harming the site and what it could be used for.
That's really interesting. When you say non-experts, you mean non-experts in sustainability?
Non-experts in sustainability, and potentially also in the more specific aspects like structures, like the services, heating and cooling of a building, daylighting, all those kinds of things that buildings need to operate that can be quite complicated systems.
But it's a really interesting point, but sort of comes back to my preaching to the converted, in that obviously linking up everyone who's working on a project, and that's obviously something, Danielle, really interesting for all of you, but how you make sure that people understand the issues, it's communication, education.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to holler back at your point as well, is we're forgetting the core element here is the building's lifespan. If we're talking on a building, yes, we're going to be building a New York every day. I think that's a statistic. But the most net zero building is the one that's still standing because the materials are locked in place at this point. It's how do we prolong the life of that as well? So we're looking at it from, yes, I can put recycled content into concrete and cement, that's my bread and butter, but there are other key factors of circular economy, which I am not an expert on, hence why we need to work together on this as well.
Well, Kim, what's your take on that? Because that's, again, somewhere where you sit very strongly, like how you make very separate entities come and work together and understand what's at stake.
So this is where I would like to see carbon, cost, circularity within the same matrix, because they're often seen separately. So we'll do an embodied carbon assessment for a building, or we'll do a cost analysis of the proposed development. But when it comes to actually understanding the value of the materials locked inside an existing building, we'll potentially do a pre-redevelopment audit or a pre-demolition audit. Actually, we don't use the word demolition, it's deconstruction. It's the same with waste. It's not waste, it's unwanted resources. So once you've understood that value, it's then actually using that as the communication and narrative piece. So it's not just about the value of the materials, but if you start then putting cost against the materials that you've already got locked inside your building, and like compare that to the carbon and the cost of buying something new, actually, when it comes to a client, that's what they care most about. It's like, how is this going to benefit me in the long run for short-term embodied carbon cost and long-term embodied carbon cost?
So they care about it, but will they pay for it?
Yeah, so because I've got experience recently of clients wanting circular economy because it supports the embodied carbon. At the moment, it's crazy. Like I said, we've got so many materials already in circulation, but not as many of those existing materials already in situ are appropriate for deconstruction and refurbishment and reuse. And because there is such a strong requirement for lower embodied carbon targets within the building industry, that actually there's a high demand for those materials that are few. So actually that's in some cases driven the cost up to have refurbished recycled materials, because they're not as widely available because of the state of those materials coming out. So what we need to do is, when we start thinking of incorporating new materials and building new assets at all levels, is being able to design them for deconstruction to enable the reuse and repurposing of them in the future.
Did you want to add something again? You just look.
Perfect.
You look very enthused, but that's just exactly right, as you should. I mean, some of the barriers we've obviously discussed, many of those. But what, Helen, do you think are the perhaps ones we haven't, the biggest blockers to reuse?
I think at the moment it's probably collaboration, really, which we're getting there. But a lot of the reuse, a lot of the element level or above reuse has been very specific. So it involved sort of where the elements have come from, the building that's been deconstructed, and the new construction often has been either with the same company at the same time, which is like a remarkable coincidence for you to need the exact thing that you happen to also need to get rid of. So I think it's just that level of collaboration at the whole industry level, potentially on a local basis geographically, to build marketplaces digitally and physically, to match make between resources we have and resources we need. And I think that applies at the material level as well. The less far we can have to transport any sort of recycled aggregate, any sort of, there's a lot of stuff here. Transporting this around the country is difficult and takes a lot of energy with the associated carbon emissions. So the more we can make this a sort of nationally coordinated but locally driven marketplace, I think the better.
Can we do that without government and without policy? Is that who needs to lead on that?
Policy? I think standards are an issue as well. There's only so much that I can do on a manufacturing scale in terms of recycle material. What's frustrating is that you have different standards throughout Europe who are already doing some of this technology, and we're not at that stage in the UK yet.
Have you got any examples?
Yeah, so we've got in Holcim, Switzerland, we're already producing cement which contains construction demolition waste material. And it's called Sustaino, and it's being put into conventional ready mix, conventional precast operations. In the UK, we're on that journey, but we're looking more at the recycled concrete fines piece, which is the standards will be updated within the next year, hopefully. It's a project which I've worked quite closely on. So that's very exciting, is that I see that as the gateway to having more novel materials within cement as well. It's just a time thing.
I mean, what do you think, Kim, in terms of who needs to lead? Is it enough for manufacturers to be leading? How much input, how much policy needs to be involved in this?
I know what I would like to see, and my favourite term is local urban metabolism. So it's very much what Helen was saying about creating these local environments for the recirculation of materials. And
say again a term?
Local urban metabolism. So it's like material recirculation on a local level. There's different uses of that, putting factories next to each other where one material's byproduct gets directly input into a new product. And that's how it used to be in, in the Industrial Revolution. And we don't do that as much, maybe on a smaller scale. But what I would like to see with the urban metabolism is the accessibility of secondhand marketplaces and recirculation, either on physical hubs or like online platforms. And we do have that. They're very London focused. There are international, national platforms as well. But to be able to do that on a local level, you're going to need governmental, local council support to provide spaces, because storage is an issue, and it's the timing of one project removing products off the site or unwanted resources that aren't going to get repurposed and directly into that site. They need to find a new home, but the timing of projects being perfectly lined up very rarely happens. So we need somewhere to store it, but also refurbish it, and that gets into the legalities of insurance and warranties, etc.
Yeah, I mean, it's come back to you, Helen, in terms of what you started, collaboration. You're working on a really significant project with a whole load of professionals and extraordinary people. I've been looking at it on my way here on the train, but do you feel supported in that? Because as brilliant as that is, how can it have an impact if policy is kind of lagging behind?
Yeah, I think there's been real enthusiasm from all the industry stakeholders that have been working with our Build Zero research project. And I think that's really great. And I think hopefully we can help by bringing people together so that no one company is kind of feeling like they have to do it all alone. There's also a lot more informal things around. So there's the Engineers Reuse Collective, which is another grouping of industry down in London mostly, and things like that. So I think, there's quite a lot that can be done by the industry working together. But at the end of the day, if the regulations are getting in the way of that, then it's not going to have the impact that it could.
I mean, and that's the point you a few questions ago brought up. If regulation and policy doesn't keep up then with the speed of innovation or the will, for example, collected in this room, Helen's project that she's just been describing, how do you keep the momentum going?
I think you said it, it's will. You've got people who want to make a difference at this point. So it's applying pressure as well. People in our generation, my generation, we know we're in a climate emergency and we know that something needs to be done. Okay. So my passion is my job. I enjoy what I do because I feel like I'm making a difference and a positive contribution and influencing the change. I think at this point we don't really have much more of a choice. We sit on it and let things go how they're going. But I don't think we're happy about that and we want to make a difference.
How would you say that people who don't have your job can influence the change?
I think just by educating themselves, educating other people and talking about it openly. This isn't a taboo subject and it shouldn't be. And even if it is, you can only remove the taboo by speaking about it more as well.
Okay, so we come to sort of optimism and hope. If we were sitting here recording this podcast in 2050, what would ideally we be discussing? Would we just be job done? Would we be just, wasn't that a wonderful, however many, 24 years? Or where do you think we'll be?
I think, in an ideal world, obviously one of the challenges is the speed that we need to move compared with the speed that the built environment changes. So I think the kind of ideal scenario for in 20 years is that we're going there going, oh, isn't it such a shame that there's still a few buildings that we don't know exactly what's inside the structure, because everything we've built in the last 20 years, we have a really clear picture of what all the different layers of the building are, the structure, the sort of cladding, the services, and the owners or the occupiers or the people who are engaged with that building really understand it, or at least have the paperwork to understand it that they could pass on to say, actually, we'd like something slightly different, and it can be done because we know exactly what's there, we know what resources are there, we know what capacity is there to make changes to suit this future use.
So that sort of much more wholesome understanding is what you would want to encourage. And how would that come about?
I think, we can start from today with material sort of passporting. But basically that just means recording what we're putting in buildings really well so that you actually know what's behind this wall, what's inside this column.
Who are responsible for that?
So in terms of new builds, a lot of it comes down to the engineers and the designers kind of producing the right thing, but it's obviously got to flow through into the actual on-site team constructing it, and then it becomes mostly the owners certainly for large multi-storey kind of buildings, keeping those records.
Danielle, 2050, apart from you taking over the world, which seems definitely going to happen with your passion. What would we be discussing in an ideal world? What's happened?
So I think there's going to be materials all over the UK, especially. We are a hub for potential materials. I don't want to say waste now. Waste materials, which could be utilised into other, not necessarily the built environment, into anything. But if I take it from my standpoint, from what I work towards, look, we've got carbon capture coming in, where we're capturing CO2 from our cement factories. That's a waste at the moment. There's going to be so much opportunity. What does that carbon give us? Can we do something with that carbon? So in part of decarbonisation, the cement process, you're generating another material which you could potentially use, which I can't quite get my hands on personally yet. So I'm excited for that part of it. What can we do with that carbon, whether it be carbon mineralization within concrete or aviation or something completely different? So there's always going to be something that we can dig into and look into in terms of waste materials.
Yeah. Okay, same question to you, Kim. 2050, what are we sitting around the table discussing?
So calling back to my initial comment about the amount of stuff that's already in existence, it would be the massive reduction of extraction of raw materials and harnessing what we've already got and appreciate what we've already got. And the recirculation of materials on local or national levels is just the norm. Yes, it's about the recyclability of the materials to ensure that they stay in circle for as long as possible at as high as possible value, but it's understanding the longevity and adaptability of these spaces as well, especially with concrete frame buildings. It's you can probably strip the whole thing and leave just the frame, and it's understanding the capabilities of that. I saw an example once, this crazy example. It's when you see videos from the 1920s in America and they're moving whole buildings on rollers. It was kind of like that when I watched this building cut out around column, the concrete columns, and lifted the whole floor on hydraulics. To complete, to reuse what was already there, because that when it comes to embodied carbon of buildings, most of the carbon is within the structure. It's in the foundations, the structure, before you get to facade and MEP and things like that. So the fact that you can harness and repurpose and meet new regulations for height requirements on floors, there are other ways. We just need to be inventive. And yes, there'll be some cost uplifts, but imagine the whole demo and rebuilding of that building. It's going to cost twice as much, more, but yeah, it will impact program and you won't have your building as quickly. So
when you all describe these things and you work within the industry, for someone who doesn't, it strikes me as very important to also educate us. So yes, to educate everyone who's involved in terms of manufacturers, in terms of people who are working on site, all the things we've discussed, but it feels exciting to me when you describe those when you describe everything so visually, the ways in which you could try and encourage people to understand, to appreciate what's there and the process. I mean, do you have any in terms of Build Zero? I imagine that's something you take into consideration, because if we're not understanding or on board, then nothing really happens, I guess.
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of, everyone interacts with buildings through their work, through their home, etc. And we shape, ultimately, the demand from the consumer shapes what the clients want from those buildings. And we need to make sure that while we're doing this, we don't lose sight of the fact that these still need to be good quality homes, good quality workplaces with adequate space, adequate ventilation, etc. But I think going beyond those kind of what we need, what makes a home or a workplace safe and usable, there's a lot that's kind of almost fashion driven. And that, when we're talking about such huge amounts of resource use, is really difficult. So I think for people to understand that maybe a building that might have ever so slightly lower ceiling heights, maybe it could actually be hugely more sustainable than if that building had to be knocked down and rebuilt so that your ceilings were 20 centimetres higher up. I think if people understood that would probably be a trade-off people would often be willing to make. But at the moment, it's kind of out of the hands of the general public. They don't even see it. It's just invisible.
I guess it shouldn't be a choice. Or also just about changing what's in this word fashion that we shouldn't quite rightly use. It's just about changing that. But just one more 2050 thought with sort of regards to my obsession with why policy, how you can do it without policy catching up. But in 2050, Danielle, what would that look like? Would there be a law that regulates this firmly?
I think we need to understand now that innovation is really important within construction itself. Never mind just at universities. We're branching out from the university blue sky thinking concepts and implementing them real world. It's really happening, and there's so much like really good testing that goes on through academia all the way into what we practice within manufacturing as well. So I think, again, yes, it's a mindset. You've got a lot of people who sit on standard committees now who've been in place for a lot of years. So you've got to bring those people around as well and say, look, no, these things are happening. You have confidence in your test methods. We've got confidence in the results. How do we speed this along now? So I guess more flexible standards, more flexibility in testing. And I mean, I don't have the answer on how we can improve long-term durability of buildings. I'm not an R&D scientist, but there are people there who could do something. So it's the bringing them on board as well.
You might have sort of answered this next question in what we've discussed so far, but can you just tell me if there's one main myth about circular economy that needs busting, what that would be? Oh, Kim, we'll start with you. Like, what false idea do people have about it that needs righting?
That secondhand is inferior. And I think we've already touched on this, that repurposed, reclaimed, recycled materials are just as beautiful. There's a story there, there's a narrative. It's like the Japanese bowls with the gold paint. Like, it's showing the beauty and imperfection. And I think we are getting there more with buildings, but I think the mindset of consumerism definitely needs to change.
The wabi-sabi as well, the Japanese concept of imperfection, which I feel the fact that has come into a lot more conversation in recent years gives me optimism that idea that repurposed and recycled is inferior is being eked out of the mindset. But what would you say, I mean, is the biggest myth that needs busting?
Mine would be the same, that you can make something from that something which was old into something new. So personal example, I had this really ugly bookcase at home and I've got two very beautiful cats. So we dismantled the bookcase. The top of it is now a perch where the cats sit, and the two side panels are now two shelves which are on our wall which the cats use. So it saved me a load of money buying cat furniture, and now I sound like a crazy cat lady as well. But yeah, so it's repurposing an old ugly bookcase into something which I think and my cats really, really like as well. So it's that, and plus it's a talking point. It's exciting. It's fun doing new things, isn't it? It's creative.
It's reimagining.
Yeah.
So I'm optimistic because I think that people are catching up with that idea. But do you think it's still a myth that decidedly needs busting?
No, I think it is. Yeah, I think there's some brilliant examples out there. So yeah, I mean, at a slightly bigger scale in Sheffield, there's a lot of ex-industrial buildings, brick warehouses that have been turned into some fantastic spaces, food places, bars, houses, all of those sorts of things. And they're much better, I would say. I think the town agrees based on their popularity. They're much better than a pure new build would have been. And it's got that heritage there. And I think if we can just expand that mindset to a slightly wider range of source buildings, I think there's not actually, as you say, that far to go. It is already, the idea is there. We just need to broaden it out and make it more every day.
So is there another myth then around circular economy that you think people are tending to believe that isn't true and needs
I think
correcting?
that it's not happening is probably the other one. I would say that the one that the others have mentioned is the main one, but I think it is happening. It's starting to become in various different places in construction and elsewhere. People just need to believe in it, and it will keep growing.
Yeah. Well, that could be the answer to my final question that was about optimism. And not necessarily. Hopefully you might have another optimistic response up your sleeve. But what is the one thing that most gives you optimism? Not in the, obviously with this theme in mind.
Yeah, I don't personally... I think the word is hopeism.
Okay.
So I think because hope and optimism kind of gives the false impression that it's others' responsibility. So within here, it's about that collaboration piece. But if we're not dealing with it, it's somebody else's problem to deal with. Or we're going to wait for that technology to magically appear and save everybody. And, it's going to suck all the carbon out of the air, that kind of thing. Mm. So, yeah, less hopeism. What I'm most interested in seeing is the creation of people on the ground creating networks of material recirculation that I honestly see being possible and for everybody to get involved in. And then in terms of just like the potential of out there futuristic technologies, I'm personally quite interested in carbon materialization, like mineralization, like the physical creation of the CO2 either from the carbon storage capture or from just capturing out of the air. Like it sounds really futuristic, but it's being shown that it is possible, and just like the complete crazy potential of that. I'm not saying it's going to save the world, and I'm not saying everyone should rely on that one technology, but it's fascinating.
I think there are probably a lot of things we could have sat around this table saying sound completely crazy not very many years ago that are now happening. So, but can you clarify the language? So not optimism or hope-ism we shouldn't use.
I think hope gives the false sense of that somebody else is going to do it. That's all I'm saying. And I think it's for everybody. As we've all been saying, it's a collaboration of policies, designers, manufacturers. Yeah. So it's for us all to deal with, not just one.
Yeah, really interesting. One thing that gives you hope is enthusiasm for the future.
About 4 years ago now, through work I was doing my undergrad degree, and my dissertation was on circular economy in concrete. That was suggested by my lecturer and supervisor at the time, and I had no idea what circular economy even was. So, and neither did anyone else around me. So I'm thinking, oh my God, I've got to find what these indicators are, what it means, where it's come from. And now I'm sat here speaking about circular economy with you guys. So it's the rapidly shifting conversations and the mindsets. If that's what's been achieved within 3-4 years, what can we achieve in 20 or 30?
That's a lovely answer. It's given me goosebumps. What about you, Helen?
Yeah, I'm going to say I'm very privileged to get to supervise lots of final year dissertations. And I think, even as you say, over the last few years, now students are coming up and saying, I want to do a final year project on the circular economy across a whole range of materials, a whole range of, specific locations, things like that. And then, so seeing that level of enthusiasm, and also then hearing that when they graduate, virtually all of the companies they go to are willing to listen to that enthusiasm, take it on board and, put it into practice, and support them, come back and support our research projects, things like that has been really excellent. So that whole top-down and bottom-up enthusiasm has been really great to see.
I mean, I personally think that that's a very good place to end on a properly not hopeful, but collectively enthusiastic and inspired note. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Well, that brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you to our fantastic panel and to you for listening. And don't forget to join us next time on The Material Mix.